Welcome to the latest episode of Five on the Floor on the Five Reasons Sports Network. Thanks for joining us on your favorite podcast app. We're now on Red Circle as well as Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and the Five Reasons YouTube channel. If you're there, you get all of our other South Florida sports content. Make sure you hit like, subscribe, and turn your notifications on. Also, check out FiveReasonsports.com. During the NBA Finals, columns from Mateo Mayorga and Brady Hawk. You can find them there without a paywall. And check out the great sponsors of the Five Reasons Sports Network. We always mention Prize Picks. Use the code 5. Definitely use the code 5 this week. They got all kinds of promos going on here. Of course, you can play any sport, but we're promoting the NBA Finals. Use the code 5 to get your initial deposit matched up to $100. Download this fantasy app from the from prizepicks.com, the Apple App Store, or the Google Play Store. Again, it's prizepicks.com. Use the code 5. We're also sponsored here by Keystone Chiropractic. That's our friend Dr. Jonathan Chung. Been with us here from the beginning. Great guy, lives up in Palm Beach County. We can service you all over South Florida. He's a board-certified chiropractic in chiropractic neurology. He specializes in chronic pain, dizziness, and post-concussion syndrome. He's got a new sports vision training program that's used by athletes by Steph Curry, and he offers in-person and, as I mentioned, telehealth consultations at an affordable price. So mention Five Reasons. And again, you don't have to live in Palm Beach County. He can still work with you anyway. So check him out at Dr. Jonathan Chung on Twitter or chiropractickeystone.com. Again, that's chiropractickeystone.com. And now, today's episode. All right, welcome back to Five on the Floor. Here's today's floor plan. I'm Ethan Skolnick. You can follow me at Ethan J. Skolnick on the Five Reasons Sports. I am back from Denver, back in South Florida. We got Brady Hawk. Follow him at Brady Hawk 305 and Alex Toledo. You can follow him at Tropical Blanket. They are all in South Florida. We're all going to be at Game 3, which comes up here on Wednesday night. Series tied at 1, the NBA Finals, Denver and Miami. And what we're going to do, we did not prepare for this one. I know I mentioned that many times on previous episodes. I'm going to just scroll through some of the strategic narratives that have popped up in this series, some of which obviously I heard when I was out in Denver and some of which have sort of made the rounds today. So let's go through these. And the number one is the one that got Eric Spoelstra so irritated, and he kind of went off on an ESPN reporter about it, but I actually thought it was a reasonable question. Is it right to say, considering the fact, I'll start with you here, Alex, considering the fact that the Nuggets are 0-3 in the postseason when they've won almost all of their games, when Nikola Jokic scores 40 or more, which is what he just did in the last game, is it fair to say that you want to make Nikola Jokic a scorer instead of more of a facilitator? He had 4 assists in all of Game 2, and he had 10 assists in the first half of Game 1.
Well, of course, it's fair to say. I think Spo has taken on just a different sort of, I don't even want to call it defensiveness. It's more just like, maybe defensiveness is a good word, just because, the whole organization is about defense first. And it's like he's always, in his defensive stance when he's out there on the podium. He's waiting for the reporter to mess up so that he can go in and, get the steal and kind of embarrass. No, I'm exaggerating. He's not really like that. I just think sometimes he gets kind of tired of hearing things over and over again, especially when a topic is kind of hammered like that. And, just like we might get annoyed with certain narratives, he does too. And that's kind of his time to voice it. And, he did it to somebody who has been around for a long time, who I think is probably, she can take it, right? She's been there forever. It's not going to affect her livelihood. But really, I just think, of course, it's fair. And they did it. Like they made the MVP, who is maybe the best playmaker in the league, best passer in the league, and maybe the the toughest individual to guard in this moment. You made him uncomfortable. I mentioned this last night by taking him out of his game, and 4 assists, 5 turnovers, along with forcing him into 28 shots. That's the blueprint right there. You're probably not going to be able to do this every time. Like I said, I think if he just comes back tomorrow and it's more of kind of what he did in Game 1 or something closer to that, I would not be surprised. He is that good, and I'm sure they're going to hit the film and see what they can do to, kind of mitigate that plan. But I also think Spo doesn't like, he won't admit that he's doing certain things. Also, too, he doesn't want to talk about the game plan, and all of that just came together. And he's good at what he does. I'll just say that.
Yeah, no, I mean, he clearly wanted to throw a shot across the bow there. He's done this a couple times. He does it more, and I know, Alex, you're sort of speaking to a little bit of experience here. We've all dealt with this locally, but I feel like it's more to the national folks that he's frustrated they haven't watched his team. That's the sort of thing that comes across, particularly with a certain 4-letter network. of which this very esteemed reporter happens to belong to. But Brady, I mean, again, what I noticed in the first half, and I was sitting with Mateo and I said this, I said Gordon and Porter aren't getting into this game. That it's basically all Jokic at this point. And we saw that mattered late because they didn't have other guys who were kind of engaged and were in rhythm when it mattered. And even Jamal Murray really didn't get into rhythm. So do you think this is a real thing, or do you sort of agree with Spo that we're making something out of nothing?
Well, I'll say in terms of the Gordon Porter type stuff, I think that has to do more with his initial adjustment, which was to throw Kevin Love into the starting lineup. Like that's what pretty much threw that off. Because we saw in game one, it was like Aaron Gordon with Gabe Vincent on his back, possession after possession for post up into a layup. And it was like, then they switched things up, and now Love's guarding Aaron Gordon and helping off. He's kind of taken out of the game plan. If he wants an open to early contested three, he can have it. And Porter just kind of has carried over 2 straight games. We talked about with Max Strus in game 1. It's just been like he just has not been the shooter that he was in previous series in this playoff run. So with that said, it still does feel like a thing in terms of they're willing. I don't know if it's as like, okay, we'll make Jokic a scorer. I view it as we're okay with Bam guarding Jokic one-on-one. Like that's kind of where I see it, because there's still times where they'll send a double down. There's still times when they'll do different things. But when Bam Adebayo was on the court, they're like, if he's making it tough, like even looking at his shots that he had that Jokic was scoring, they were some tough shots he had to hit. That's why he's just a very good player. But man, Bam was making him work. So they're just okay with him going one-on-one in that way. And I just like them when they stay home on shooters in that way. Like if they're going to do that, I like that range. And then also, as I talked about the initial adjustment with Kevin Love, it helps when they made that adjustment, they put Jimmy on Jamal Murray. So Jimmy is now not being a helper anymore either. Jimmy is saying, you're basically saying to yourself, Jimmy, you're glued to Jamal Murray. There were times in that game as well where Jimmy, like, he started to help down to Jokic when he was guarding Jamal Murray, and it was like, wait, don't do that. Like, you're not guarding Aaron Gordon anymore. So it just seems like this is the game plan change. It's not that they're just saying that picking one or the other, because you really can't. Like, that's just simplifying things. I think that's where he's getting at. But definitely the game plan, the lineup shift is definitely leaning in one direction more than the other.
All right, we're going to talk about Jimmy Butler, narrative number 2 here as we go forward. I do want to mention another sponsor of the 5 Reasons Sports Network. It's You Break, We'll Fix. It starts with a U. Actually going to be one of our sponsors at our Game 5 watch party. Just announcing that now, actually. It's going to be at Tropical Distillers on Monday night, Game 5. We'll have some of the crew from 5 on the floor there and other sponsors. We're going to have drink specials, all kinds of cool stuff. But also our guy Mark's going to be there. So you can find him usually, though, at You Break, We'll Fix. That's based in North Miami, the complete automotive wheel solution. If you ever park too close to the sidewalk curb, I know I have, You Break, Wheel Fix specializes in the repair of damaged wheels from bends, cracks, curb rash, and more. They also do the refinishing, the powder coating, the cool colors, and all the rest of that stuff. 305-748-0112. That's 305-748-0112. Find them at You Break Wheel Fix or youbreakwheelfix.com. Again, they're based in the Aventura area. All right, let's get to Jimmy Butler here, because I tweeted this last night, and to me, this is the most remarkable part of this run. It was somewhat explainable when you had Jimmy Butler playing like Michael Jordan. But the Jimmy Butler of the last sort of 8 to 9 games has not been that. Not that he hasn't had good moments, not that he hasn't been important, but he's played like a star. He hasn't played like an otherworldly being lately. And look, there are a lot of reasons for that. I watched him hobble to the scorer's table yesterday. I thought he was kind of a troll. Then he hobbled down onto the court. He was hobbling on defense. Clearly the ankle or something else is bothering him to some degree. There are other things that have been up in the air. I'm not going to repeat those. I'll let the National Carnival Barkers do that and get into people's personal lives. I'm not going to do that. But we've mentioned he's been dealing with a bunch of stuff here. So I'll go to you first on this, Brady. Can they win this series if Jimmy is just this? If he's good, if he has moments of takeover, particularly on the defensive end, but if he's just this on offense, which is pretty close to regular season Jimmy, maybe slightly better.
So I'll start by saying I feel like we put an asterisk next to different things throughout this playoff run. Like if you get this, can they still win? And we're like, no. And then they find a way to win. They're like, can they still shoot at this level and find a way to win in this series? And then they do it. And it's like, it's over and over and over again where we doubt a certain thing and it still happens. On paper, they shouldn't be able to win this series if Jimmy looks like this. There's just certain games that they're just going to need him to enter takeover mode, it feels, because there feels like there's a point where maybe Gabe isn't hitting the pull-ups and the catch and shoots that he's hitting, or maybe Bam isn't hitting the bunnies that he's hitting. But then again, they might just be able to grind their way through this. Like, there's a small chance of, like, as bad as I thought that Jimmy was in that game one, and even game two, it just seemed like he was just slow to get to his spots in general. He hit timely ones. Like, you think about that, there was the stretch early in the fourth quarter where he got like back, he had a three, and then he got an and one down the baseline. And then late in the game, he runs Jimmy Bam pick and roll down the stretch, and he gets a pull up jumper, and he feeds Bam, and it ends up kind of icing the game away. So he hits timely buckets when needed. So there's a chance that you don't get this unworldly Jimmy Butler and they still find ways to win. But when you're talking about needing to win 3 of the next 5 games, you're going to need some version of top Jimmy, and especially at home. And I think that's why this is interesting, and it's a good time to talk about this, because now they head home, and in your head, you're like, they just got their split that they need, but now you need to take care of both of these games. And it's one game at a time, but you need both of these to really put yourself in a great position in this series. And we've watched too many of these games at home in this playoff run to not think that Jimmy has to be great at home, because he's the one that feeds into the crowd. He's the one that gets the role players going, that then they start feeding into the crowd. And there's just things that I think transcend X's and O's in that building that they just need from him. And look, it's not even about the scoring numbers and all that stuff. They found, like I said before, they found something defensively, and they're going to have to adjust all over the place. This is not the final adjustment. They're not just going to be able to stay on this exact matchup, but they found something with kind of matching up the Murray Jokic pick and roll with Jimmy and Bam. And if Jimmy's not going to be unworldly on the offensive end, he's going to have to be pretty great defensively the rest of this series for them to kind of grind this way out, guarding Jamal Murray, because he didn't have a fantastic game. He had a decent game, Jamal Murray, in game 2. But if you can hold him in that way, that puts you in a great position alone. So I don't know about the bare numbers, Ethan, but I will say they need him to be good or great, at least on one of the two ends, for them to kind of grind this out.
So, Alex, I mentioned not just him sort of hobbling to the scorer's table, but there were a couple of sequences. There was one where he threw up that wild lefty layup on the break, which I felt was because he couldn't sort of elevate to the rim. And there was another time where there was a break situation, and I felt like 2 weeks ago or before the Josh Hart thing, he would have gotten the ball, gone, flushed it. But it doesn't seem like that's happening right now. So how effective does he need to be? I mean, put a level at it if you can, for them to win this series.
I think, kind of something slightly better than what he's shown through 2 games in this finals. I think if you clean up some of the scoring, and I think he hasn't found the balance yet between the playmaking and the scoring. I think he got his field goal attempts up this game, which, you have to see in a finals game. Like, Jimmy has to take a certain amount of shots, and he has to take certain shots that are there for him. I understand that, he's pretty much always going to play the right way. He's not going to take those early clock shots that they're kind of, that there's sometimes space to take. And I sometimes get frustrated that he doesn't take, just because I think you want to scare the defense a little bit and make them think he might just take that shot. But at the end of the day, he's just playing basketball the right way. He said that, plenty of times in pressers, and I really do believe it. Just his process, he's going to simplify the game as much as he can, and a lot of times what he's seeing is kind of the Nuggets help defense loading up, especially as he's getting ready to make his move, and that's when he kind of passes out, and it's either to a shooter who's wide open or to the person that's being shaded or helped off of that ends up making a play off the catch and gets the next thing moving. And I think really that's kind of the stuff that has set them apart from their regular season offense, is just blending some of the stuff that they were doing in the regular season with the stuff that they've done in past years, specifically with the perimeter-oriented actions, with the handoffs and the constant weak side movement, all that stuff. I think they're really, generating great looks because of the way that teams are defending them. And even though the Nuggets are mixing in all these different looks, Jimmy is just kind of going down there and diagnosing what needs to be done. And he not only sees that they're dropping for him, that doesn't mean he has to go out there and take every mid-range pull-up that they're allowing him to. He can attack the drop, engage that help defense, and then get the rest of the offense moving. Just like, running a handoff with Strus or Robinson gets the defense moving on one side of the court. It's all about, how can I move the defense and make something happen with the offense. I don't think Jimmy's first option is always to score. I think that the option to score is he when he is going to score is because that's what he feels like he needs to do. And I like the way that he reads the game. But all that being said, I think he needs to be, just a little bit better and attack the rim more. But all that is just, again, just like making Jokic into a scorer is so much easier said than done. You can be sharp with your principles. Actually executing it is so hard. And just because they did it in one game doesn't mean they're going to be able to do it again. Just like that, it's just going to be so hard for Jimmy to kind of be relentless as an attacker because of the ankle stuff. I know he's never going to admit it, but I really do think it's affecting him. Like all these high usage, high minutes games, and just all these games that have taken place since he's injured that ankle. He's not giving it time to heal, and you don't want him to sit. Of course not. But because of that, this is the kind of stuff that happens, and I think he's fallen off a little bit, and now it's just kind of about pacing himself.
Yeah, I mean, this is an injury that typically I was told yesterday would have been 4 to 5 weeks that he would have taken off during the regular season. So that puts it in some perspective. All right, when we come back, I'm holding you guys to this. We're doing rapid fire. You got 30 seconds each on each of these questions. I'm going to buzz you and go to the next. Okay, so we're going to do some rapid fire and some other strategy stuff. We do want to mention you need a strategy for gambling because you got to be playing Better Edge. Better Edge is one where you can play against others. You're not playing against the book. It's legal in 44 states, including the state of Florida. So go to betteredge.com, play in our competitions. We've got all kinds of specials that we run there, different promos. If you use the code 5RSN, that's the number 5RSN, you get $20 to play. That's at Better Edge. That's with an O, betteredge.com. All right, we're going to go here quick. First one here. Who is more important for the rest of this series, Brady Hawk? Caleb Martin or Duncan Robinson?
Caleb Martin, to be honest. I think he's more important just because if they don't get what they've gotten from Duncan Robinson, they have another guy on the roster that can give it to them. And I know you could say that in the context of Haywood Highsmith, but it's a little bit different. So I think they're going to need Caleb Martin a little bit more. Even looking at, I know you said rapid fire, but really quickly, the stuff he was doing in the fourth quarter, he always just hits a clutch shot down the stretch of these big games somehow in the corner. I just can't get over that. But the way he was battling at the top of that zone, he was instrumental by getting Jokic out of that free throw line area in that zone in the fourth quarter. So they're going to need him to still play heavy minutes. And it's still funny, as much as we talk about the Zeller minutes, Spo is still going to be more like not, even after the Highsmith game that we saw in game one, is still not willing to give him like a crazy amount of backup 5 minutes or anything like that. So Caleb's still going to probably be just as important.
And Caleb did that with migraines too, which
you could tell too.
Right, and can be a condition of the altitude and all the rest of that. So everything else he was dealing with. I do think they're playing him differently, which is making things harder for him. But I understand what you're saying about Caleb there specifically. All right, I'm going to go to you on this, Alex. Some conversation about this. The Nuggets are only playing 8. Spoelstra played 10 in the first quarter of the last game, and that doesn't include the guy we're going to talk about before we get out of this episode. Will the Nuggets short bench hurt them by the end of this series? Braun is their 8th. He's playing like 15 minutes.
I think there's a case to be made for that, just depending on how many minutes you're playing, guys. I don't have the minutes played for like Jokic and Murray in front of me, but I don't believe they've gotten like too high up there yet, relative to what it could be in the finals, right? It's not Thibodeau level yet, but there is a case to be made there. But I just think, in the finals, and, they've had this rotation for a while. It's just about playing your best guys and who are the most kind of consistent two-way players that you have, and that's exactly what they get. I mean, that 3-man unit has come in and made things hard for the Heat. Like, you think that the Heat's bench, which has been such a positive for them in this whole playoff run, comes into the series averaging like way more bench points. When you just look at that specific thing, you think it'll be an advantage, but they've done just a great job mucking things up, specifically on the defensive end. I think they kind of get some more switching when those units come in. And it was creating turnovers and they were getting out in transition as a result of it. And I think, maybe you see a little bit more switching in general with or without that bench unit going into next game, because we've seen in the past it can muck things up for the Heat, and they obviously are going to have to adjust. They can be sending the same drops, and even coming up to the level is going to be hard for them because the Heat are so good in playing out of 4-on-3. So we might see more switching. And I think that, the bench unit has kind of been the lineup that has showed you the success there. Like Bruce Brown, Christian Brown, and Jeff Green, have come in there and just played like solid two-way vets. And it's funny because this Christian Brown is a rookie, but that's why he's in that 8-man rotation. They just have, they have two-way players all around Murray, Jokic, and Porter, if you don't want to consider him one.
Brady, is Bam the MVP? Let me get this. Does Bam have a chance to win MVP of this series?
Definitely. Most definitely. I think right now, if the Miami Heat, if the series was over, he's the MVP right now. So if they can continue it, and I said it before the series, like everything was going to be run through him. The fact that you have to deal with Nikola Jokic defensively, and then everything is run through you offensively, that's the other thing about the reason I lean Caleb over Duncan is because there are so many guys that can feed Duncan or Bam in the pocket, and it's not just Duncan in this series. We've seen it with Kyle, Gabe, Max, everybody, because Alex said on the 4-on-3s part of this, and it's like Bam just has all these things to do. And it's not just about the passing that we were talking about before the series. He's literally scoring efficiently and at a high clip and hitting the jumpers that he was pre-All-Star break. We always talk about those dotted line jumpers that he was finding comfort with. He's doing that right now. So he's literally, what is he at? 20, I think it was like last time I checked, 23, 11, and 5, something around that in this series so far. And having to deal with Nikola Jokic. Like the job that he has is so difficult. So yeah, he definitely has a very strong case to be made if he can kind of find consistency.
All right. Want to thank our sponsors. I'm going to go to Alex with the last one here. KeystoneChiropractic.com. Check out our guy, Dr. Jonathan Chung, big supporter of the network here, big Miami sports fan as well. You Break Wheel Fix. Reach out to Mark and his team. Get the discount there. Prize Picks. Use the code 5. Better Edge. Use the code 5RSN. I'll introduce this with a little bit of reporting since for those of you who stuck till the end. We have reported for a while Tyler Herro was ahead of schedule. We did not report when he was coming back. We've been reporting he's ahead of schedule physically, but that we couldn't guarantee when he was going to come back because there's more to this than just the physical. That's what a lot of people in the organization have said to me over time. Then the Woj report comes out that he's going to be ready for Game 2. The Heat vehemently denied that at the time to me and others. Didn't end up playing in Game 2. Then there was this pivot that he's going to end up playing at home in Game 3, which I always thought if he was healthy made the most sense because you get some time off before it. He gets back in at home, not in the altitude. You don't know what his conditioning is going to be like from a basketball perspective. The guy hasn't played in nearly 2 months. Okay, I watched him on the court. He looks smooth and all the rest of this. He's going through most of his normal routine, but you just don't know until, again, he's started to go through some contact drills, but there's also the conditioning and just the confidence in the hand. But Alex, our reporting over the past 24 hours, and I posted this on Off the Floor, and if people are following that, they knew this already, was that I wouldn't guarantee him for Game 3. This feels more to me like a decoy than it feels like him really coming back. And the Heat wouldn't be the first team to do this. I mentioned this, I think it was 2013, the Bulls against the Heat. Derrick Rose, before every game was questionable, he never played in the series. Okay, that sort of thing happens when you're trying to throw something out there. We know that Spo likes deception. He was pissed off that NBA TV, Jared Greenberg, reported that Kevin Love was going to start. I confirmed that report before Spo even spoke. Spo denied that he had made a decision, and of course we know he had planned on starting Kevin Love all along and criticized himself for not doing it. So I don't believe Tyler Herro is going to play in Game 3. And I don't know that Tyler Herro is going to play at all again in this series. But I'll just leave you with this, and you can close with this. Do they need him?
Always saving the toughest questions for me.
It's all a lead up to that. Do they need him? At some point, in some role, 12 minutes, 15 minutes, something, do they need him to win this?
Do they need him? The answer to that question is no. Does that mean they should be above playing him if he's healthy? The answer to that, I think, is also no. I just think it's such a tough situation to manage right now, and the vibe that is coming off of not only the reporting that has come from you guys, the reporting that has come from everywhere else, and just like the specific anecdotes, like him saying that he's feeling that soreness after shooting, and even though the shots look good, and it just feels like all of that is kind of building up to he's not quite ready yet. And I think ideally you'd have him take up a spot in the rotation if he was really feeling good. And he was saying that. I think, maybe I think you're right that he's not going to play in Game 3. But, and I think Leif has said this in the past, they could just list him as active and not play him. And that's also just a similar thing that you're saying as far as the decoy type of strategy where you never know if he's actually going to play or not. And if they just don't want to mess with what they have, it's completely understandable, especially right when the last thing you see is a game where both Duncan and Max play really, really well and have like just huge stretches in that game between Max's first quarter and Duncan's second half. Just insanely huge production from them, and they're just perimeter motion offense and all that stuff that they're constantly generating good looks out of. It's tough to mess with that right now because it's been such a big part of their playoff run. Their defense first, but their offense has been improved. And we mentioned on another podcast, it's like they finally leaned offense. And you look at the playoff, we spent all summer talking about leaning offense, and now you look at the playoff roster, they're in the finals, 1-1 going back into Miami. They have Kevin Love instead of PJ Tucker. They have Caleb Martin, a big part of the rotation, who obviously, is a bigger threat than what PJ offered you. And the team is just hitting from three at a much higher clip than they did in last playoffs. And they're playing off of that so well. I think Tyler can fit into it, whether off the bench or as a starter. I think it would likely be off the bench, like you mentioned, a 15-minute or so type of spot. I think he can fit in there, but maybe after a loss, not right now, and maybe after he feel a little better.
Well, there are some politics to it, and some of it is not being blamed on him. There's no question. I think the fact that he's come out and said that it's bothering him in some way physically, I think buys this situation a little bit more time. You mentioned the offensive rating. I looked this up today. The Heat are now third in offensive rating in the playoffs. They were actually right behind where Boston was. Their offensive rating in the playoffs would have been sixth overall in the regular season. So that gives you an indication, because technically things slow down in the playoffs and scoring becomes a little bit more difficult. I know pace obviously adjusted is a part of that, but I'm just saying it's impressive to see where they've been an elite offensive team in the postseason. There's no question. Like, you look at all their numbers across the board, they've been an elite offensive team without Tyler since he scored 12 points through about half of game one of the Milwaukee series. So, but my gut on this is you're not going to see him at all. That's just my gut. I feel like I do think he could be active. I do think that this could be a little bit gamesmanship. They certainly don't need the active spot, so they can certainly make him active. But I don't necessarily think that the conditions have set up, whether it's physically, whether it's the state of the series, whether it's the fact that you're throwing him into this kind of environment after he hasn't played for the last 2 months. I don't get the sense we're going to see. What's interesting is the national media guys, many of whom I'm friends with, spent some time with out there, they all think he's coming back. The locals don't. I'll tell you that. And typically on the Miami Heat, and I'll close with this, there's no offense to any of them, but it's the way that the Heat operate. We know more than they do. And so when I'm talking to Anthony and to Ira and to others, and they don't think he's coming back, and the stuff that I've heard is I don't think he's coming back, and then the stuff that Greg's getting is he doesn't necessarily think he's coming back, and Sean Rochester and others in our network, but I got the national guys all sort of waiting for him to come back. I don't think he's going to be back. I'll just leave it at that. All right, I want to thank Alex. I want to thank Brady. Thanks to our sponsors again. We'll be back for another episode on Tuesday. We'll be at the arena on Wednesday. Have a good night, everybody.